Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance. Thank you so much for joining me here yet again, and as always, let's get started with the news. Now, the biggest story of this week has to be Pioneer's coming of age party. After months of experimentation and lower profile tournaments, we've finally had 4 different regional Players Tour events over the past 2 weekends, putting Magic's newest Eternal format to the test. This is Pioneer's first time on Magic's biggest stage, and everybody wants to know, how did it do? Well, I'm recording this video before Top 8 at the Players Tour in Phoenix, but with 3.5 of these tournaments in the books, it's safe to say that the Pioneer metagame is still in a major state of both flux and growth. Now, rigorous testing ahead of the Players Tour weekends have been a pretty big part of this, but so is the release of Theros Beyond Death. The addition of Underworld Breach and Thassa's Oracle broke the format wide open, giving us a bunch of new combo decks like Lotus Breach and Dimir Inverter. A couple of weeks ago, Pioneer was firmly an aggro mid-range control type of format, and now it is much more combo-centric. So what's good in Pioneer right now? Well, 2 weekends ago, Dimir Inverter was the deck to beat, and last weekend, Lotus Breach was the deck to beat. Now, both of these combos are great, but the jury's still out on whether they're so good they might get banned, or if they're merely good enough to be pillars of the format going forward. The metagame is just moving so fast, it's not possible to make any snap judgments right now, at least not any that are going to hold weight. Beyond those two, there are a dozen or more other viable decks in Pioneer right now. Everything from Mono Black Aggro, to Bant Spirits, to Niv to Light, to Mono White Heliod combo, there's Big Red, Mono Blue Devotion, Izzet and Soul, Sultai Delirium, the list just goes on and on. I'll be getting into the risers and fallers in a few moments, but as you'll see, there just hasn't been a ton of crazy movement, and this is the reason why. Pioneer is really diverse right now, and you can more or less play what you want as long as you've got a solid matchup, or at least a solid sideboard against combo. This spells good things for the Pioneer Index as a whole, but I would caution against thinking that any single deck is going to explode in value over the next week or two. We're just not looking at that kind of metagame right now. Let's move on then to gaining ground, where in Pioneer it was Collected Company gaining the most ground this week, surging just 4 tickets from 12 up to 16. This modern staple has recently started to catch on in Pioneer in a very big way, and this price spike was almost entirely due to the Bant Spirits deck that finished first at Players Tour Nagoya on the 2nd of February. And honestly, that deck was a popular choice in Phoenix as well. This new Bant Spirit build has a pretty solid game against Dimir Inverter, in large part due to the presence of Spell Queller, but dipping into green for 4 copies of Collected Company really does give this deck some octane that it lacked in the past when it was just an Azorius deck. I'm not sure how much higher the price of Collected Company can go since, winning a Players Tour is already a pretty exciting accomplishment, but a 4-ticket gain, that's pretty modest for a card with such a high floor. So if you're interested in actually playing Bant Spirits, buying Collected Company right now seems great. Also up this week in Pioneer, Soulscar Mage, which jumped 3 tickets from 7 up to 10 after Big Red finished 6th at Players Tour Brussels. Eidolon of the Great Revel also jumped about 2 tickets from 8 up to 10 thanks to the play it sees in the very same deck. So why did 2 single-ticket rares from a second-tier Pioneer list go up in price this week? Well, to me, it's because Big Red is currently the best budget option in Pioneer. Soulscar Mage and Eidolon are the 2 most expensive cards in this list, give or take a stray singleton Mutavault that you can kind of leave out if you want to, so it's easy for folks to buy in and take this deck for a spin. That doesn't bode super well for future games, though it is worth pointing out that Eidolon of the Great Revel is one of the better sideboard cards out there against Lotus Breach, and it's solid against Dimir Inverter as well, so I don't think that's necessarily why it gained value last week, but it's a good reason to suspect it might stay kinda high going forward. Well, let's move over to Modern now, where our 2 biggest gainers of the week were Seasoned Pyromancer and Renin 6. Seasoned Pyromancer gained 3 tickets from 15 up to 18, while Renin 6 also gained 3 tickets from 71 up to 74. That's a 21% week-over-week gain for the Pyromancer, and a 4% gain for Renin 6. Let's tackle the Planeswalker first. Renin 6's price has been pretty flat for a couple of weeks now, and a 4% gain doesn't exactly qualify as a major price spike. Jund is still pretty stable as the third most popular deck in Modern, which is roughly where it's been since the Opal and Oko bans. Now, I do think that Renin 6 has another 100+ ticket rally in it, but that is going to require another metagame shakeup, or for Modern to enter another bull market. That usually happens in the spring, or maybe around this time of year, but it hasn't happened yet in 2020, because people are focused on Pioneer instead. So yeah, you can definitely buy Renin 6 now if you want, but it's certainly far from my top priorities. As for Seasoned Pyromancer, well, the card would be my sneak of the week this week if I wasn't already talking about it here. This was a 7-ticket card before the bans, and its gains have been slow and steady since then. I'm not sure we actually have a definitive Seasoned Pyromancer deck in Modern yet, but decks like Gruul Midrange, Mono Red Prowess, Modern Burn, Mardu Pyromancer, Living End, and several other fun brews all make use of this powerful mythic. And since Modern Horizons has a tiny supply on MTGO, even small bumps in playability can cause price spikes like this. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up over 20 or 25 before it stabilizes. Let's move on now to our biggest losers, where in Pioneer it was Teferi time-raveler, dropping 12 tickets from 68 down to 56, marking the card's first real drop since right after the new year. And I'll admit this was a little surprising to me. The card has been at or near the top of the bestseller list for months now, supply is low, and it's just been so stable. But there's actually a good reason for this card's drop. It's the rise of combo in Pioneer. Pioneer is very much a combo-heavy format right now, and even though Azorius Control is still a popular deck, Control in general is somewhat on the downswing, especially over the past week or two. So it's people selling something big to buy into Dimir Inverter or Lotus Breach, and they're choosing to sell their Teferis in some cases. Will Teferi recover? Yeah, I think it will. It's an amazing card in all formats. Control always finds a way, and Teferi's even in Niv to Light, a deck that I think will recover some metagame shares once it gets its combo-centric toolbox in order. But that Teferi price chart, it's still pointing down right now, so the Planeswalker might actually drop a bit more before it does eventually recover. If you're in the market for Teferis, I would monitor this one closely and buy in as soon as it looks like it hits bottom. Until then, I'm staying away. There weren't any major Modern losers this week, so I want to pivot back over to Pioneer and talk about a couple more losers there. The next two biggest losers of the week after Teferi were Mana Confluence, dropping 8 more tickets from 22 down to 14, and Inverter of Truth, which tanked 5 tickets from 9 down to 4. And quite frankly, I'm a little surprised about both of these. Mana Confluence is approaching its low since the inception of Pioneer, which just makes no sense to me because it's one of the key cards in both Niv to Light and especially the Lotus Breach combo deck, as well as several of the format's other weird multicolored brews. It's an amazing card, super important in the current meta, and it's in financial freefall. Plus, its paper price has done nothing but slowly grow for the past couple of weeks. Mana Confluence is a card I am definitely buying once it bottoms out because its metrics are great. Its chart is still pointing straight at the floor, so I'm not buying today, but I'm going to be monitoring this one very closely because this trend will turn around. As for Inverter of Truth, this drop has more to do with the speculation market than anything involving the actual Pioneer metagame. A ton of people went super deep speculating on inverters, and then they just sold them all right away like I advised last week, because hey, with a combo card, locking in your profits as soon as possible is almost always good. I mean, you never know when something will get banned or just immediately hated out of the format. People don't seem to be betting against this deck in general though, because Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, was actually up 5 tickets this week from 10 to 15. Now, I am still a little bit worried about Inverter of Truth's midterm future. I mean, maybe Inverter will be banned, maybe Dig will be, maybe the deck will fall out of favor, but I wouldn't be shocked if Inverter of Truth does rebound a bit over the short term. Based around how good this combo is and how much play it's seeing, 4 tickets for its signature mythic is just way too low. It should be in the 8 to 10 range, and I bet it'll end up back there soon. Let's move on to our sneak of the week, and this week's sneak is Embercleave. Yes, again, I know this has been my sneak before because this card has been bouncing around between 2 and 8 tickets for months. It was as low as 3.5 tickets earlier this month, and it's currently at 7 and continuing to rise. So, will Embercleave simply hit 8 and then drop again, or is this the start of a more persistent bounce? I honestly don't know, but Mono Red aggro is both powerful and a good budget deck in Standard. Big Red is doing well in Pioneer, and here's the thing, friends, Embercleave is just good. It's the kind of card I like to bet on long term because at some point it'll end up being a 4 of in some bonkers Modern or Pioneer deck, and it'll spike to 20. I'm honestly not sure if now is the last time to buy under 10, or if it's the top of yet another short-term bounce, but I wanted to point this card out again nonetheless. If you do decide to buy Embercleave, I don't think you'll regret it, as long as you're willing to be patient if that short-term gamble doesn't end up working out. As always, let's end the week by taking a look at the MTGO Trader sales data over the past 7 days, and this should give us a great idea of which cards are the most popular on Magic Online right now, regardless of price increases or decreases. Looking at overall sales by volume, Thassa's Oracle was by far the most remarkable card of the week. The only card that outsold it by this metric was Mystic Dispute, and it's quickly become the most important Eternal card in all of Theros Beyond Death. You'd think the price went up or at least stayed the same after so many people bought copies, right? Well, no. Thassa's Oracle actually dropped 2 tickets this week from 4 all the way down to 2. This is honestly baffling to me. I get that non-mythic rares from newer sets don't usually end up being worth all that much on MTGO, but it's far from impossible if they see a ton of Eternal play. Field of the Dead is currently worth 6 tickets, for example, and it was as high as 40 back in late November. And don't get me started on Teferi Time-raveler, a non-mythic that's been 70 or 80 tickets for a while. I simply cannot imagine Thassa's Oracle remaining in the 2 tickets or less range forever, and it's one of my favorite buys out there right now. You might have to wait a few months, but it will eventually pay off. In terms of overall sales by price, we have a new champion. Yes, Teferi Time-raveler is still selling well despite the price drop, but the biggest winner of the week by a massive margin was Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. And this is pretty clearly a result of Sultai Delirium, which won the Players' Tour in Brussels last week. That deck runs 4 copies of Uro, but it's not even the only deck in Pioneer that relies on the Simic Mythic. It's pretty clear to me at this point that Uro is going to remain the standout financial card in Theros Beyond Death for months to come. As for the price, well, it's currently at 50 tickets, which is just a 2-ticket gain from last week. There's more room to grow here. I don't know if it'll happen right away, but Uro's realistic ceiling is somewhere in the 70 to 80 ticket range. Now, I don't personally like the risk of speculating on a 50 ticket card in the hopes of it reaching that mark, but if you're in the market for a Pioneer deck and you want to play with Uro, I think you're on fairly safe ground snapping up the Mythic Rare now. And that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you again next Monday morning for another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.